Today we're talking with Gopal Chandramowle. He is the former Chief Supply Chain Officer of Industrial Products at Stanley Black & Decker. He has over 3 decades of experience in automotive and industrial companies, including Ford Visteon and Tyco JCI Stanley Black & Decker, and is an accomplished engineering and management executive with expertise in greenfield startups, business turnarounds, strategic planning, disruptive innovation, and process and product design, end-to-end supply chain operations management in a global landscape. Gopal has lived and worked in North America, Europe, and Asia. So welcome, Gopal.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to sit and talk to you today and share with you, and looking forward to a richer dialogue. And hopefully I can enlighten a couple of people.
That's great. Yes. So today we're going to talk about supply chain risk, with which you have a lot of experience, diversified experience. So first question, what are some basic things that supply chain executives can do to reduce their supply chain risks?
So every supply chain exec on a annual or a yearly basis should be looking at the broad categories that can impact their operations globally, whether it be revenue impact, margin compression, or supply disruption to a customer. Uncertainty of any magnitude is not good. Any single point failure should raise eyebrows. Risk profiles never remain static, but are dynamic in nature. So it is extremely important, one, pressure test all that impact source, make, and deliver. And this is applicable to both internal operations as well as your larger supply base that includes your raw material providers to your service providers. So the recommendation is to create a simple checklist and across a bunch of matrix different elements, and we can talk about it. Those factors create high, medium, low. That impacts revenue, whether it's profits or it is supply disruption. And then any that are high and low, high and medium, those need to be attacked at once. Those are extremely important. So let's talk about some of the factors that you would apply this matrix to, this risk assessment matrix, I would call it. Currency shifts. We've spoken about it. It's causing inflation in a lot of places, a lot of companies. And in some cases, you can pass the price on to the customers. In some cases, you cannot because of long-term contracts. Demand shift. This is an ongoing issue and a challenge that one needs to plan for. The bigger one, due to climate change, is natural disasters. Let's talk about some of the snow ice storms that hit Houston in 2021 that impacted all the resin supply, right from BASF, Celanese. It's still remnants of that still remain. And it's not easy to recover. It has taken more than a year and a half, too. Let's talk about floods in Germany. For 75 years, it never happened, but it suddenly happened in 2022 and impacted steel supply firms, which brought the automotive firms down to their knees. So this is a big issue. The other one that we can talk, which is closer to home, we had hurricane tornadoes in July of last year that hit the Pfizer plant that makes injectables, and there was supply disruption to both the hospitals as well as for infection care. This is near to home. Then we had a fire in a big plant that made resin that's supplied globally out of China. So each of these elements, one needs to take a look at it. In the past 30 years, the world has been rather quiet, and you have not seen any climatic impacts of great magnitude that have impacted business operations globally. But with the climate change these days, this is something that is front and center. The other one is geopolitical events. For 30 years, things have been quiet. Now we have the Russia-Ukraine war that cut off gas supply to Europe, choked off nickel, titanium, some of the raw material supplies, impacted grain supply from Ukraine to some of the other countries. This is a major issue. And then, the Indo-China border standoff that has caused tariff and blockades on importing of electronic components into India. This has impacted the global trade. Then we've had the Japan-China standoff. There's a couple of a Japanese executive was arrested for espionage, and that has choked future investment out there. Then you have the China, Taiwan standout due to the chip supply that has created a lot of uncertainty. Then you also have some of the human rights challenges in Xinjiang, you know, where cotton supply has been impacted, auto parts that were being, provided to the German plants, those are being impacted. Then, off late, we cannot forget about the Houthi crisis in the Red Sea. That has impacted ship lanes. Incremental 20 days being routed across the Horn of Africa, and the rates have doubled because insurance rates have gone up. So each of these elements are something that in the past world was a lot more safer, much quieter. Now one needs to contend for, and the enterprise risk mitigation plan needs to address this. Then you got some of the other stuff that has come along due to this, which I would say geoeconomic, trade barriers, tariffs, China versus US, China versus the European Union, China versus Asia. Okay, so this has all impacted the cost of goods. So one needs to address these challenges. Then we cannot forget the global pandemic, the COVID, the stringent Chinese government measures against different companies really impacted supply. And at that time, there was not a secondary supply route. So this is something that has come to light, and one has to prepare for this going forward. Then IP protection in some of the regions, regulatory enforcement, these are new challenges that have surfaced. Sustainability challenges, decarbonizing efforts. These are things that I need to look at, when your supply base and also your internal operations. And there are different commitments by different countries, and depending on companies that are global in nature, they have to comply to those standards as well. So these are new, I would say, headwinds in some respects, but opportunities in other respects if you can overcome them. But you have to plan for it, and you got to have discipline. Then you have the labor challenges. Last year we had the Detroit auto strike that impacted supply. Usually you want a healthy supply of maybe 75 days of cars on an auto dealership. That shrunk down to 30 days, and that impacted the complete downstream. So this is something one needs to take a look at. And also the threat of unionization and a lot of non-union plans that has also raised some eyebrows. Let's put it this way. And then you have in a lot of companies that manufacture and also supply base key equipment stability, having adequate spare parts, skilled technicians to repair if things go down, or operators to run it. This is something that needs to be taken care of. And some companies have started taking a look at using condition monitoring to understand how to prevent downtime on the critical assets. So that is important. And last but not the least, this list is not comprehensive, but IT systems robustness. Hacking, cyber crimes have really raised their ugly head. So response to all of these are usually multi-layered and multi-tiered, right from maybe dual sourcing to nearshoring. But even in nearshoring, let's say take the case of US. If it's in Mexico, you need to make sure the supply base is not reliant on the old supply paths out of the countries in China or the companies in China. You want to make sure it is truly diversified and gives you the stability and the resilience. So automation, you have labor challenges in the US and Europe, and this needs to be done cleverly. You need to make sure that it is maintainable and it is sustainable. Using robotics, it's easy to say, but to maintain it and having high up times, it is both an art and a craft as well. And then, selectively taking a look at inventory buffers for some of your critical elements, because it's not possible to create backups for everything. So in a nutshell, I would say the new term is to make your end-to-end supply chain more robust. I would call it make it anti-fragile. With anti-fragile includes resilience. Resilience usually refers to returning it to the past condition. But as you've spoken, risks are dynamic in nature and things change. Okay, so you want to make it anti-fragile so the system is more and more robust.
So what are some, so those are some good basic things that executives can do to reduce supply chain risk. And when talking with supply chain executives, a lot of them did mention things like secondary sourcing and, potentially nearshoring if possible. What are some more sophisticated things that they can do to reduce risk? Like somebody last time mentioned digital twins, and I know that there are some who are using artificial intelligence. How realistic are those things to implement, and what makes the most sense?
There are a couple of things that can be done, and they need to be anchored around three foundational elements: people, process, and technology. Firstly, one needs to take a look at, yes, you can create a digital twin, and it's the right thing to do from end to end, from customer to delivery. It is not, let's say you need to have, if a scoring of 10 is having real-time visibility, you need to be at a level 6 at least. Okay. And you can't do this across everything. It takes time. And yes, artificial intelligence algorithms help in using it. So one aspect is the data. Once you have data visibility, second thing is understanding. So you need to have a team of people who are upskilled to ability to understand this data and take actionable intelligence. That's the second thing that needs to be done. Technology on its own is not enough. The other thing that needs to be done is once you do your risk assessment matrix, especially the highs and the mediums, those need to have a robust backup plan that needs to be pressure tested, so they do not come back and cause undue cost excursions or supply disruptions. The other thing that can be done is reduce complexity. In most companies, complexity is a big killer, whether it's SKU complexity, footprint complexity, supply-based complexity, ERP complexity. Multiple touch points cost more cost. The other aspect that I would look at is ensure standardization of both processes as well as products. To create dual sourcing, it is easier said than done because you need to revalidate the design if it's the new product source. And sometimes the products have regulatory certification, and certification takes 8 to 12 months if you're in the medical field. In automotives, around about 6, 7 months. In its aerospace, it'll be a year plus. So it's got to be done very thoughtfully. And it is great that that discipline is inculcated in the product design cycle upfront itself. So, it's easy to work with the same supplier and see if you can create multiple manufacturing points distributed globally to reduce the risk. And so trying to recreate, because it does take time. And sometimes it is not possible. And last but not the least, I would say is, having good customer demand visibility and supplier collaboration. If they can also get on the same digital platform, it's a journey. It takes a good 3+ years to do it, and it takes time. There are a lot of good packages out there, but that needs to be interfaced with a bunch of ERP systems. If there are multiple ERP systems, it's utopian to say that a company will all be on one ERP system because it costs a lot. And also, with the dynamic nature of the business, there are mergers and acquisitions. So you acquire companies that might be on a different platform. So you need to account for it and accommodate that.
So all of these solutions seem pretty expensive, especially having like backup manufacturing sites or other things in different locations. So how can supply chain execs respond in a way to disruptions that can help them keep costs down, or prevent disruptions from happening that is not high cost?
That's a very good question. It's a tight balance and it's a trade-off. Like an example is nearshoring versus the most optimal cost, lowest landed cost. And the lowest landed cost, you have the cost of distance. So you have the inventory carrying cost, end of life, the demand doesn't come through. You might have a shelf life concern, if the product has one. That versus nearshoring, where it might cost a bit more, but you're more agile to demand fluctuations and also any design changes. So those are the trade-offs. You need to look at the total cost equation, not just the material cost. Just like the people who are bringing material right now on this ship lane using the Red Sea, the transportation costs are 2x. Now, if you add the whole cost equation up, most probably it would tell you nearshoring would be roughly the same. Actually, you'd be a lot more agile. So you need to look at the total value equation, and also in some cases you have SLAs with your customers where if you disrupt, you're responsible for cost or downtime. So one needs to look at all that and then say, okay, what's the right balance, and how can you strike it? And the more simplified your product portfolio is, the easier one can do it. One can also take a look at, hey, do you really need a supply base? Then you go through your core versus non-core analysis. Maybe you bring more products in-house, okay? And you need to look at asset utilization in that case as to what makes sense.
Okay. So I just have a follow-up question to something that you noted earlier. So earlier you were talking about potentially simplifying complex supply chains. Is this something that is realistic, and how can supply chain execs strive for that? Like, how can they carry that out?
It is realistic. So let's put it this way. I used to always use this term: simplification is amplification. The cost of complexity is fairly high, okay? Whether it's SKU, footprint, supply base, ERP, there are hidden costs and that reduce efficiency of any organization. More touch point, more cost. Yes, I myself have done where I had a portfolio of 125,000 SKUs, and you do an 80-20 analysis and really understand which SKUs are generating profit and also are, besides being margin accretive, also have growth. So you do the 4-quadrant analysis and you will find out that really there are only a handful that really drive. I have a case of a plant that I used to run. I used to have 6,000 SKUs. And I did an 80-20 analysis and I found out 125 SKUs were generating 95% of the revenue. So the rest was actually waste, not only in equipment, multiple supply base, multiple touch points, planning, end of life, aging profile. And so it was very important. I also worked with customers to move them to other common SKUs and shared with them, okay, you can get a cost reduction if you move to that. So a lot of times, customization looks very attractive, but there is a cost element attached to it. So again, it's a balanced equation to ensure that the customer understands that, yes, I have a backup. I make this in multiple places, multiple geos, and it is resilient and it's anti-fragile. It is robust, and I can rely on the supplier. That is what one of the key elements is. One of the things I forgot to mention is as part of the anti-fragile exercise, you also interact with your top 10% or 20% of your supply base to understand the risk mitigation factors. And then you audit them to really make sure they are resilient and they can support and they are robust against supply disruption.
That's great. I really love your example there. Cool. And last sort of two-in-one question, what kinds of short or long-term investments should supply chain executives make to reduce their risk of disruption?
What I would say, the short term one is very simple, it has come to light in a lot of companies after the COVID challenge is mapping, having data visibility, right from customer demand to what the supply base is. So one needs to map the supply base, the complete supply chain end to end, you know, and then create a risk matrix assessment. Especially when there's a crisis, that's not the time to create the visibility. Data should exist, okay? And then actionable intelligence can be taken around to handle the crisis that is required. Because customers expect the suppliers to have done proper due diligence, okay? Businesses don't like surprises and they don't like uncertainty. They're two things. And, recently after the COVID crisis, the supply chain resilience or sustainability has been elevated to the board of directors level. So it is imperative every supply chain executive every year present the State of the Union address as to how resilient is the supply base, how much revenue impact, how much margin compression, the potential for supply disruption to major customers. If so, what have they done? And money is being given to this aspect because it has become critical to the business. So truly, I got to say, the crisis, every crisis has an opportunity and it's a silver lining. So this has given a seat at the table at the highest level in most organizations to the supply chain executive.
That's great. Some really good points in there. Thank you very much, Gopal Chandramowle, former Chief Supply Chain Officer at Stanley Black & Decker. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.